get the feather, or that plastic part in the back of the squid, if you can get that through the feather, generally they hold on pretty well, these squid, they're quite easy to put on. If you're in an area of a lot of pickers, then basically, yeah, sure, maybe whack on a little bit of bait thread, but you can feel the feather, that plastic thing, with your thumb, and if you can get the hook through there, it's really hard to get squid off. So basically, again, I mean, that's not the way Hon-su would dress before he goes out picking up girls, but it's not too bad. And I mean, everything's gonna eat that. It's just gonna be awesome. So they're my favourite baits, and I said as I said, the sand whiting's also a really good bait and it's so easy to catch. You're just in that 20 metre zone near the ships out there on the way out. Really good bait, and as Sergeant Baker is just awesome as well. So I'll leave that there with the bottom meat. If you've got any questions on that, just come and ask me later. Now what I'm going to do is just show you a simple bottom bouncing rig. And I mean, you guys are probably tied and use these longer than me, but for just the people out there that have never used one before, a bottom bouncing rig usually consists of two dropper loops, which you can tie around your fingers. You can do a proper dropper loop, which is really pretty easy. You don't have to use those swivels. Like a proper dropper loop is as easy as this. You can basically grab the line, push it over like that, and then you create a loop. This might not get in your head the first time if you haven't done one before. You create a loop. So once you got a loop, you can basically pass the line over and over and over and over, just using a center point like that, and just twisting the line over and over. And then once you've done that, it doesn't matter, like anywhere between 6 and 20 times, depending on the thickness of the line. The lighter the line, or the thinner the diameter, the more times you need to go around. And then you just pull the line back through and just create a dropper loop like that. So that's really easy. Now you can create a bigger dropper loop and do a figure of 8 in it, okay, like that. So when it's longer, you can create a figure of 8 and cut one side off and tie your hook on. Just whatever you do, don't loop the hook on through there, because the hook never sits perfectly. I think it's really important to tie it, okay, or you can just cut one side off like that, and just tie a hook on. Okay, so that's the best way to do a dropper loop. Don't do this one. I've seen it so many times, just around there like that. Just don't do it. Like I've seen people catch heaps of fish on that and they lose all the good ones. So that's just around your fingers. You can do it in 400-pound line, but I've just been out with people that do that stinking horrible knot before, and they catch the big jewie that's under the boat, probably the only one you're going to come across, and it just rips the hook in half. And even if you use your drag properly, if you get another fish on the other hook, they just pull the line apart. And that's why I use heavier line. I use somewhere between 130 and 200 pounds for bottom bouncing, even if I'm using 30-pound main line, simply because you think you're a really good angler and whatever. If you get two good fish on, they will pull it apart, okay? It doesn't matter what you're doing with your drag, the fish will actually pull it apart. Okay, so that's the cheapo style rig, and it'll catch your fish. These 360-degree swivels are the best way to do it, okay? Simply because that can spin around, okay? It doesn't twist your line. So that's spinning that way, okay? And it spins this way as well. So basically, it's gonna not eliminate line twist, you'll still get tangles, but you'll get a lot less tangles. So basically what I've done on there is put a triple murder assist on there, or you can just do a double snell. Now, a double snell is always going to catch more fish with one hook. I reckon three hooks are even better again. But I'll show you how to do a simple snell. Now, this might be a little bit hard to see from where you are, but again, if you want to know how to do this knot, if you don't know how to do it already, you can come up and I can show you, and I can get you tying a snell in 5 minutes. So basically you create line, you create a circle in the line. So a lot of people, when they're doing it, they put the line both the same direction. You have to cross the line. So cross your hands over, okay? grab a hook. Now for bottom bouncing, there's no right size hook. It depends on your bait and what fish you're chasing. I like 607 or 80 for most baits. So basically place the hook, you don't have to put the line through at this stage like that. Place the hook against the lap over circle. So it's a circle with a lap over. And you grab the long end, not the short end, the continuous end, and you wrap from the top, okay? And this is the hard part. That looks easy, but that's not. That part there, see how I've overlapped it? And I'm just wrapping from the top to the bottom, and you're not doing it tight, because if you do it tight, you'll create kinks in the line, which creates tangles. There's no right amount of times. Again, heavy line, you can get away with 4 or 5 or 6 turns. With light line, you might have to do 8 or 10 or 12. So once you've got it there, you just have to hold it, and if I take pressure off my thumb and finger there, it'll just tangle and fizz out. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to manage this line here. I'm just going to get the kinks out so there's no kinks. And what I usually do is spit on that, but I don't spit in public, so I'm just going to hold it in my teeth like this, and then pull the short end. Okay? See how that's nice and firmly together. I'm not putting too much pressure because you'll get kinks. And then once you get to that stage, don't pull it all the way up. You can push it back down there, then pass the end through the eye of the hook, and that is the strongest possible way of joining a knot, joining a piece of fishing line to a hook. So some people say, yeah, that's the strongest knot and that's all I use, rah rah rah. What they don't realise is you still got to tie a knot to this end. So I don't fuss too much on the strength of that knot, because you still have to attach that generally to a swivel, unless you're using an FG and tying it direct. Now the next hook, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, but once you've done it half a dozen times, you're right. Now the distance between there depends on the bait that you're using. So I know I keep it fairly short. So you put the hook in place where you want it. It doesn't matter if it's straight or crooked, because you can twist it around anyway in the bait. Okay, and then you hold it, and then just forget that bottom hook's there. So you create your circle again. Okay, so forget that hook's there. So you're working from this side, and then you just work from top. You can stick that through there now. It does it through the eye of the hook if you want. It doesn't make any difference. The eye of the hook doesn't matter at all. It just manages your line a little bit. And you wrap this part again, is the hard part, wrapping it from top to bottom. Now this is a proper snell, not a silly snell. A silly snell is the one where you can grab the line and push it, and it'll actually start to unravel. It's still strong, but they still unravel sometimes. So this is important that you don't just pull that, because you'll get kinks here. So this is where you've got to manage this bit of line here. So get the twists out in your mouth, and then pull. Again, always spin on it first, because the line will burn. So that's pretty neat. It's extremely strong. It's the strongest way of attaching hooks. It allows you to position the hooks in a bait any which way you want. You know, this way, you can put one that way and one that way, but it doesn't make any difference as long as you've got the hooks in there with the hook points nice and proud of the bait, then you're laughing. Now this part is a little bit tricky. Well, it's just tying a bloody knot, but to get this part short, because this part can't be long, because if it's long, it'll twist around this main line of your rig. So basically it's just, you just got to tie a knot next, so I'm not going to beat it up, but basically to tie a knot short isn't always that easy. So basically what I do is I normally use uni knots, but I can tie a blood knot shorter than the uni knot, and they're just about the same strength anyway. So basically whatever knot you can tie the shortest will work, but a blood knot, you know, around 4 or 5 times and through and back through, which is the oldest knot in the book. Generally you can get it fairly short. I'm not even going to go back through, but so basically getting it nice and short, that's about the length you want there. Even shorter is better. So even if you can get it half that distance, I think is better. That's why this is cool, because you can sort of split ring it on, and it's nice and really short. But you know, it just eliminates or reduces the amount of tangles you get around there. So anyway, once you've got, so I've just tied 2 different examples on there, 2 different ways. Normally I'd put 2 of these on, 2 snells on, or if it's really snaggy ground, then you might use a couple of single hooks or circles because they don't get snagged as much. So it just depends what ground you're fishing. And then at the other end, some guys use lighter line to their sinker, which is cool because if you get snagged, the sinker will bust off and you don't lose your whole rig. But these days, I reckon the sinkers probably cost more than the hooks. So I just use the same line and make it reasonably long. Don't make it too short because the shorter it is, the more chances the hooks are going to get into the reef, not just your sinker. So I have it fairly long, like probably about that long, and then just do a numpty loop, okay, like that, okay, and then obviously you can just loop the sinker on. You just can't put a swivel or anything down there. You can tie the sinker on, but I find it better if you do a numpty loop so you can pass it through the eye, through the sinker and loop it on so you can change the sinker without cutting that. So that's, again, just a really simple bottom rig. If you need any assistance or tips on how to tie that, just come up and see me later and I can talk your way through it. Now you can get these things, that's just a double snell. So that snell I just tied, sorry mate, got that? This snell that I just tied, you can actually buy them pre-made. They're on a longer piece of line, so you can just shorten it to wherever you want. If you don't feel like you want to tie snells and you don't have time, you can just take these out and you can just tie them on whatever length you want them. Circle ones as well, just depends whether you prefer circles or J-hooks. It doesn't make much difference in the end, it just depends how you fish. If you're a whooper, if you feel a bite and you rip the lips off, don't use circles. And some people, it's just ingrained when they get a bite, they just give it a rip, and that's half the fun of fishing, so don't be shy about it. So that's, now hook choices for bottom bouncing. I think that's the most common hook in terms of a J hook, which means anything that's not a circle with your traditional point. I like these cutting point ones, so Owner, Black Magic do cutting point hooks. I just think they go through not just flesh but bones and scale as well, so with a cutting point they really rip into the fish. So these C points or the Owners, they're really good for getting through bone and scale as well. Whatever hook makes you jingle. Again, some people prefer circles. I just don't like standard silver, like mustardy type hooks because they're just not sharp enough generally, unless you sharpen them yourself. They always use a Japanese chemically sharpened hook because you might spend 60 grand on the boat and 200 bucks on fuel and 2 cartons of piss or whatever you take out, and then for the sake of 50 cents on a hook, some people use just crappy hooks, and I just don't understand. Just spend a tiny, like 20 cents more on a hook that's going to make a hell of a lot of difference. I think I'd rather fish in the tinny and use a good hook than a nice boat with a shit hook. But anyway, now leader material. I haven't got too much time to prattle on about this, but leader material is pretty simple. There's 2 main types on the market, which is standard leader, whether it's Jinkai or Black Magic or Varavus. There's supple leader and there's tough leader. All of these, it's all made from the same stuff, just some of it's softer and easier to tie and presents baits better, and the other one's tougher. It's more high tensile and it's got better abrasion resistance, but it's a little bit harder to work with. So if you're fishing really reefy, horrible, ledgy sort of terrain, then I'd be using like the tough or the hard trace. And if you're fishing general coral or sand with a drop off, depending on what you're fishing for, or beach fishing, I use the supple one. I think it presents baits a lot nicer. This pink stuff's really good because it's got. Can you grab hold of that? Don't break my numpty knot. I've got a numpty knot here, but this actually. So I'm going to hold it there. This has got quite a lot of stretch in it, so you'll see it actually stretches probably 10 centimeters. I like that when I'm using braid because, again, it's not just when you're striking too hard. If the fish runs or changes direction, you've got a nice reel with a good drag. Sometimes there's just too much pressure all at once, and that's how you pull a hook or bend a hook or break the line or rip the fish's lip off, which people have done before, especially when you're fishing for skippy and stuff with softer mouths. You can actually rip their lip and rip the hook out of their mouth. So basically this stretchy stuff's good. I really like it. Now the other option on leader material is fluorocarbon. Now you've probably seen it before, not everyone's used it. It's usually 2 to 3 times the price of mono. It's not 2 to 3 times better than mono. It does have certain characteristics which are more of an advantage, but it's a little bit harder to work with, so it's a little bit more higher tensile. The diameter of fluorocarbon is exactly the same generally as mono. It's not like it's thinner and breaks stronger. It's just got properties such as it doesn't reflect light. So fluorocarbon does not reflect light like mono does, so fish can't see it as easy. Now, so one thing people think, oh, that's great, fish can't see it, rah, rah, must be better. I think that is good for some fish in some situations, but when a fish has eaten that, I don't think he cares about that. It's like, you know, it's like a bogan that hasn't eaten for a week. He's got a hamburger with a hair in it. Is he going to take it back, or is he just going to pick it out and keep going? So that's basically fluorocarbon. Is also got much better abrasion resistance than mono. So I'm not going to try and sell you fluorocarbon over mono, because I don't think it's always better. But in shallower water, I think it's good because the abrasion resistance is much better with fluorocarbon than mono. But generally when a fish runs through the bottom, he doesn't just get your leader, he'll run your braid through too. So most often than not you'll get busted off, but this could be the difference between landing a fish or not sometimes. It's really good for jigging in shallower water. It's no good for floating top water lures, like some sort of poppers and stick baits don't swim so well with fluorocarbon, I feel, from my experience. So yeah, it's just something I usually use between 20 and 40 pound in fluorocarbon, but when it gets above 40 pound it's just a bit hard to work with, so I've found myself going back to mono in that heavier stuff. Braided line, there's heaps of different ones on the market. It's pretty simple in my opinion with braided line. Just buy something Japanese, because it's all Japanese make the best of everything in fishing tackle. Doesn't matter what brand it is in Japanese braided line, it's all the best. And I'm not saying that American braided line's not good, because it is pretty good. Like so your American stuff's like your fins, your Tough Line, your Power Pro, they're generally all 6 plies. There's a few 8 plies, but the amount of plies, see, that's 4 ply and that's 8 ply. It's how many filaments make up your finished braid. So that's got 4 filaments and that's got 8. Now 4's not necessarily inferior to the 8, it's just a little bit rougher, but it's the same sort of diameter and it's got the same sort of abrasion resistance. This is a bit smoother, so when you're casting it doesn't make as much noise and you'll probably get a tiny bit more distance. But in terms of jigging, I don't think the 8's much better than the 4 from personal experience, but it does last a little bit longer. But both, like any braid on the market, will last a long time. Generally you'll lose the braid before you wear it out. It's not like mono that you have to change every 6 or 8 times you go fishing. With braid, if it's on there, it's generally good. It doesn't rot unless it's been in direct sunlight. Salt water doesn't really affect it much either. So now the other thing with braid, the confusing part about braid is some is in PE and some is in breaking strain. Some have got both. Now what is PE? What's it mean? Well, PE is the best way of measuring the diameter of a line, because PE3, it doesn't matter what brand of line it is, PE3 is exactly PE3, so it's a specific diameter that doesn't change to the breaking strain. So some lines, most braided lines are PE3 is 30 pound, PE4 is 40 pound. Some of the high end stuff like the Varivas there, PE3 breaks at 55 pound, okay? So when you're using that, if you want 55 pound line, don't buy the PE3, because it's the same diameter as the 30 pound. And generally a thin diameter line is a lot easier to break than a thicker diameter line. So the PE3 55 pound is just a superior quality. So if you're using 30 pound, you want 30 pound, use PE3, and if it breaks at 55, then you've just got a little bit in the tank. You can pull a bit harder, you just got to be careful not to snap the rod. But definitely don't buy a line on breaking strain, because sometimes you'll get 55 pound and it'll be great, but it'll be as thin as 30, and then if that goes around rocks or ledges or another fish in the school or the side of the boat, that will break just as easy as a 30 pound PE3. So it's just something to remember when you're buying braided line. The multicoloured stuff or solid colour, it doesn't make any difference. The idea of multicolour is, say if you're fishing in 60 metres of water, you look at your sounder and you see fish 20 metres off the bottom, you can drop 4 colours, so you're 40 metres down and you know you're in the fish. So you can actually manage what depth your line's going down by counting the colours, which no one really does in reality, because you just got a head full of steam and you just want to kill, so you just, you know, it's hard to do. But if you're fishing mega depth, like when the sandbows are on in 110 or 150 metres of water, sometimes they're up halfway and you can sort of count what you think's about six colours down if they're 60 down, or 8 colours down if they're 80 down. And then happy days, but it's just a bit of a beat up, but it looks good on your reel too, so which is all sweet.
It makes you feel better about it.
Hey?
So it makes you feel better about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like putting mag wheels on your car, you know, going faster. But so that's Bradley. I'll just whip back to this other rig I didn't show you before. Pre-made rigs. There's some really good ones on the market now. You can get from every sort of decent tackle store. Just don't buy the real flimsy cheap ass ones, because they'll generally pull apart or they got a shitty Chinese hook. Black Magic ones are good. They've got a Japanese hook, Korean swivel with Japanese leader, and they're tied by Kiwis. These are actually tied in New Zealand, so that's a very good quality rig. You're paying an extra $3 or $4 over a cheap ass rig, but they're generally worth the money. And if you're going fishing and you've got a boat and you've got some tag-alongs, next door neighbour, or your missus's friend's boyfriend who's normally a knob, but you've got to take him fishing, you know, he doesn't know how to tie knots and stuff, just bang a couple of these in your gunnel and then you can just whack them on. You don't have to tie rigs all day, because I've got a mate who he's got a boat and he takes a lot of people out fishing because he's a really nice guy, and he doesn't fish, he just bloody ties rigs all day, because, you know, everyone else on the boat doesn't know how to tie a rig properly, so it's just handy to whack them on. So that's your general line leader. Now I'm just going to go on to a little bit of terminal into the jigging side of things. Now, there's so many different jigs on the market. Basically, when you're using a jig, if you haven't used one before, you think, oh, these things are all a bloody waste of time, they're just a load of shit, fish don't eat them, rah rah rah. When you go jigging, you can't go out bait fishing and if you're not catching anything, decide to put the jig on and expect to catch something, because it just doesn't work that way. You've got to say, right, I'm going to go jigging today, I'm going to fish the best part of the day with jigs, I'm going to persist with it, I'm going to believe that they work, and sooner or later you will catch fish with them. You've got to fish slower than what you think in your head though, because when you see people jig the first time, they're all crazy, you know, they're going 100 miles an hour. When you're jigging for bottom fish, you just want to go nice and slowly, keep the jig right down in the bottom, in the fish's face, and you just relax and you'll get a bite sooner or later. But if you can imagine 40 metres of water, you only want to be 5 metres off the bottom, 10 metres maximum, but just keep that jig in their face down the bottom. And once the line gets out, once you've lifted, if you're drifting at 12 knots, once you've lifted up 5 metres and dropped back down 2 or 3 times and your line's out there, generally people will just let it go all the way out, and what's happening is your boat is here, you should be jigging here or here. Once the line gets out there and you're jigging, the angle of the line, the jig's not going to work properly, and when you hook a fish, there's a lot of bottom that he can actually snag you up on as well. You're not pulling him straight up, you're pulling him through the bottom and up, so generally you'll lose some of the bigger fish you hook. So different jigs, different shapes and sizes. The best, if you think you know what the best colour is, it's probably going to change the next time you go out, so that's just one thing that we haven't figured out yet. But just a mixture of natural colours and bright colours. The more glow on there generally seems to work better with glow on there, especially in the deeper water. So, but generally that shape, that short, fat sort of shape, which is a slow type jig, is really good for our bottom fish. When we're fishing for sambo's and kings and tuna and stuff like that, a longer sort of knife jig is good, because you can work it a bit quicker through the water. It's got a little bit more action when you work it quicker, but that's a whole another story. Now, rigging a jig, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but this is not the right size hook for this jig. I'm just demonstrating this so you can see. This is like 10 times bigger than what you need so you can see it. But generally there's a lot of different ways of attaching a front hook. Generally we put a hook at the front and sometimes a tail hook as well. Sometimes we put a double on the top and a single on the tail. But what I've got is I've got one of these. Now this is a ball bearing swivel with a solid ring that's been welded into the ball bearing swivel, so you don't have to use a split ring in contact with the fish. So basically the split ring is always your weak part. See that? So that's pulling. There's a split ring only holding the jig on. The solid ring's pulling through that ball bearing swivel, which maximises your strength. You don't have to worry about the split ring, which generally, even if they're strong, sometimes they can undo. So I'll show you how to rig up. Now, doing it this way, you don't need to buy 10 different packets of solid rings, swivels, and split rings. It's all in one. So you'll see that. Now, basically, again, it's not rocket science, but just so you know how simple it is, you just split the whisker and whack that through. Okay, once you've got that on, okay, everything's in one section, it's all ready to go. You can set these up at home, take them out, and when you're ready to jig, you can pick the jig that you want, say if it's that one, get a set of split ring pliers, which this is not the right size again, so I'm going to struggle, but basically you can just whack that on without getting the hook in your finger. Yeah, I need the next size up in these. And this split ring is like 10 times too big for dewies. Like this ball bearing swivel is way big for dewies, and so is the jig's probably not. So you can get that on and you're all done. Okay, ready to roll. So basically with assist hooks, there's again so many different types. We like the ones with the squid on there. Okay, there's a squid dinger, which is the most popular one at the moment. That's an Indo-tied octopus, an Indo-made octopus, which is really high in UV and glow. And then they're harbour hooks, and there's some nice flash down the bottom. This one's slightly cheaper. This is just your normal harbour flashy Oki head assist, okay? But they've got nice, strong and sharp harbour hooks in them. So you just got to get the right size hook and length, not so much the right size octopus, the right size hook and length for the jig that you're using. So a short jig like that, you don't want anything longer than that. You've got to remember the hook's finished there, so the flash is just hanging down, but generally you wouldn't have the hooks hanging down here. So that's one of the ones we use. Different sizes, so that one there would be on a 60 gram to 130 gram jig. It's just a little bit shorter, but it's got nice strong hooks in there as well. And if the current's running a bit quick, or you're trying to get a jig down in really deep water, sometimes the squid will slow it down a little bit, so we'll use a normal, not quite naked, it's just got a little bit of fluff on there just to give the fish something to attack. But the idea of this fluff, or the idea of this octopus here, is the fish actually target it and eat it. So the jig gets you down. Generally, if you have a normal hook there, something like a baldy will be biting that jig. Now a baldy's got a mouth that big. He's biting the jig. The hook very rarely goes inside the mouth. The baldy or the snapper with a small mouth will bite the jig, and the single hook will come around and